That's what I think we're uniquely positioned to do at Sotheby's. We're storytellers. If nothing else, we're a hive of stories here. We get to shine a spotlight on the most interesting things that exist in this world.
Sotheby's is the temporary custodian of some of the world's most rare, remarkable and coveted art and objects. In each episode, we'll be exploring the significance and journey of an extraordinary work told by those who know it best. This is The Specialist. The Scream has gone beyond a masterpiece. It's a cultural icon. On today's episode, Simon Shaw will take us through the 2012 auction of The Scream, what it tells us about the art market today, and unpick how the work speaks to a universal truth within us all. A senior advisor in Impressionist and modern art, Simon has a unique perspective on the market, and over his 25-year tenure, has pioneered sales of Nordic art. He is the leading expert on Edvard Munch and has staged all top 10 auction records for the artist. Let's join Simon now with more.
Munch is a singular figure within art history and a tremendously important artist who actually hasn't been given his due historically. He's born in the 1860s, and in the final years of the 19th century, he creates an entirely new way of painting, along with Vincent van Gogh, which is really the painting of what we feel rather than what we see. Munch creates a form which comes to be known as expressionism, like the painting of emotion and feeling. In the late 19th century, Nietzsche has just announced that God is dead. Freud is researching psychoanalysis and the workings of the mind in Vienna. And there's a sense that humanity is going to need new frameworks, new narratives for understanding the future. So Munch sets himself the task over a series of 25-odd pictures to paint the key emotional moments in the life of a human being and to create really the iconography of the contemporary soul. The Scream itself is something of an outlier in his work. There's nothing that looks like it. And I think that's part of the reason that it became such a universal symbol that crosses cultures, it crosses generations, and it speaks to everybody around the world. There are 4 versions of the Scream. There's a first sketch in pastel. There is then a prime mixed media version, which is in the National Museum in Oslo. There is this work from 1895, which was sold at Sotheby's in 2012. And then there is a later example believed to be from 1910 or so. The 1895 version, this is actually a commission by a German coffee magnate called Arthur von Franke, an established patron of Munch's work, has a lot of his prints. Of the 4 versions of the Scream, the other 3 are all in Norwegian museums, so this is the only one which could ever be available for acquisition by a private collector. And it's quite unique among the 4, actually. Firstly, it's the most visually striking. The colours are richer and more clashing and vibrant, this sort of blood red and this fiery orange and acidic yellow and blue here. It's also the only work of the 4 which is accompanied by its original frame, to which Munch has appended the text from which the painting originally springs. He painted this onto the frame itself in blood red paint. Suddenly the sky turned blood red. I paused, deathly tired, and leaned on the fence. There was blood and tongues of fire over the blue-black fjord and city. My friends walked on. I stood there, trembling with anxiety, and I felt the infinite scream throughout nature. Munch was a terrific self-publicist, and he managed himself and the dissemination of his work very effectively, in particular using prints, which of course were at lower cost, and he could produce numbers of prints of the same image. And I think that is really the beginning of the celebrity of the Scream, if you like. The prints are disseminated, and gradually there is a growing appreciation of this image, which really only kicks into gear after the Second World War. And then in the 1960s, the image is used on the cover of Time magazine and the guilt and anxiety issue. It begins to become more and more famous. In the 1980s, when Warhol co-opts the Scream, by that time it's already so famous that he's able to use the Scream not just as one of the great works from the history of art, but also as a piece of popular culture. There's only one painting in all of art history that has an emoji on your iPhone. In actual fact, it has two, not just the scream face. There's also a cat screaming. And we know that that emoji is used millions of times every day around the world. And then the thefts of two of the versions of the Scream. So there are four in total. 50% of the Screams have been stolen. So another first is that the Scream is the most stolen work of art in the history of art too. In 1994 and then in 2004, versions of the Scream were stolen from Norwegian museums. That huge amount of media attention to those thefts added further to the Scream's celebrity. And I think it's a measure of just how important the Scream had become by then, that when the empty nail was left hanging after the theft of the Scream, more people came to see that empty hanging nail than had ever come to see the painting itself. And I can't think of any other work in history where that would be the case. Why is the Scream so powerful? I think it's because it expresses the maximum emotional power through the simplest of visual means. It's a few colours. It's really the most simple form of the human face. And I think robbing it of gender, robbing it of a body, it's just a cipher for the human condition. And it's making this very, very universal gesture. A great work of art connects us. It reminds us that the way we are feeling, others have felt before. And I think when it comes down to it, that's what the Scream does. It becomes the seminal image of the 20th century. This version of the Scream had been in the private collection of the Olsen family, a Norwegian ship-owning family, for over 80 years. And Thomas Olsen, who acquired the work, originally was a close friend and neighbour of Munch's. It hadn't been shown since the 1970s when we offered the work at Sotheby's. So it was a unique opportunity here, a very special opportunity to tell the story of an object of pivotal importance to visual culture during a period of a few short weeks, after which it may end up disappearing into another private collection, perhaps for another 80 years or so. I was very surprised that a version of the Scream existed in a private collection. I thought they were all in museums. It was a very exciting moment. It had been in a crate for decades. I flew under great secrecy to Norway to go and examine the work for the very first time. And we were in a room when the crate was opened. And I remember the screws being taken out, the lid being lifted. And this almost like a dry ice of orange and yellow and blue, an aura came out of the crate before I even saw the image itself. It's probably the most moving moment that I've ever experienced with a work of art. The Scream itself was a dialogue of many years leading up to the sale, where we considered with the owner of the picture when was the right time to bring it to auction. We decided in 2012 would just get ahead of the biggest ever Munch exhibitions, which were happening in Norway in 2013. So we thought we would do it in advance of that. And Munch's work had been the subject of a series of major exhibitions in the years leading up to 2012. So we felt that was really capitalizing upon the timing in the best possible way. We're used to estimating works of art. That, in comparison, is quite easy. When you are looking to estimate the cultural significance and geographical reach of an image like the Scream, it becomes a very different calculus. We thought about it a lot and ultimately decided that we should signal to the marketplace that we believed this work should be valued at least $80 million. But it's the only time in my career where the media, in response to this estimate, were really split in two. Half of them said Sotheby's is ridiculous, it's worth half that. And then all of the others said Sotheby's is ridiculous, it's worth double that. The truth is nobody actually knew, and that is why an auction remains in the form it does today. It's the only way of really determining the true value of a unique object. As it happened, we had 12 minutes of bidding once the auction came itself. There were 10 bidders, and they were each upping one another until we finally ended up just under $120 million, which was a new record for any work of art sold at auction. Sotheby's is unique in handling the most interesting objects of whatever kind that exist on the planet, whether that's a dinosaur skeleton or a Ferrari or a Caravaggio or a painting by Edvard Munch. As a result, we have an ability to talk about different kinds of objects that's unrivaled anywhere. And I think with that comes a great responsibility. We owe it to these wonderful objects to tell their stories in very compelling ways. And I think what we did with the Scream, I was very proud of. I remember being told by a senior member of the Norwegian government that we'd done more for tourism in Norway than the Norwegian tourist board had done in decades. And that was very meaningful to me, not just because of my affection for Norway, but the fact that this work allowed Munch's contribution, which was huge to art history, to be understood more fully by the rest of the world.
Thank you for joining us on The Specialist. This has been brought to you by Sotheby's Financial Services. SFS offers asset-based loans to unlock the value of your fine art, automobiles, and other luxury collectibles. To step further into the world of Sotheby's, visit any one of our galleries, which are open to the public. Go to sotheby's.com to find out more.